Next up, remember the Liberal Democrats? Last summer, they won just 12% of the vote, but a record 72 seats thanks to extremely efficient voting. The local elections are traditionally fertile ground for the Lib Dems, and leader Ed Davey has high hopes. But how strong are they, and is Davey making enough noise when the media can't stop talking about Reform UK? Hannah, so what is Davey's cunning plan for the locals, for people who have not heard of it?
Well, in short, his plan is to overtake the Conservatives and become the second party. And actually, it's nowhere near as ludicrous as it sounds. There's a recent poll that shows Lib Dems are now topping the polls in the south of England. Topping the polls for the local elections, but nevertheless. And frankly, with Labour in its current state and, the Tories being invisible and bonkers, it's winnable for him. And here's a quote from the recent launch of their local election campaign from Davey. People haven't forgiven the Conservatives for all the damage they did, but they're deeply disappointed that this Labour government has failed to deliver the change they promised. That's why people right across the country are turning to the Liberal Democrats. Absolutely bang on. He's not exaggerating the situation there. That is what is happening. So I think he has a lot of reasons to be quite excited. And he also launched the campaign in Henley-on-Thames, which is the constituency where basically I grew up on the my village was near a Didcot, but it was part of that constituency. It used to be Boris's constituency for all those years, and it was so, Tory all the way through the Blair years. It never, ever turned. And if you look at the situation now, it's a remarkable shift, and they've got loads of reason to be positive that they can build out from that heartland now. I don't think the Tories are going to get those places back.
So essentially, I mean, is it too crude to say that if you are a furious right-wing protest voter, then you'll go for Reform, and if you're a furious moderate protest voter, then you'll go for Lib Dems?
Yeah, I mean, the centre is tanking towards the Lib Dems, and especially they have such a good record in local government as well. They're a very competent party in local government. So I think that they will be rewarded for that as well.
Well, this is what I wondered. Kemi Badenoch, with her usual political brilliance, dismissed the typical Lib Dem as somebody who's good at fixing their church roof. The scum. But is that, I mean, which is, you can see what she's saying. It's, they're just very good at local issues, which they are. And I wonder whether that explains the gap between their sort of success and their profile.
Yeah, I mean, two things explain it. One is this kind of idea that they're boring or kind of parochial. But actually, some of their policies are incredibly ambitious. Their local environmentalism is actually really popular. And I think they're really underestimated for that reason. Also, local government matters because, Kemi Badenoch can wang on about the macroeconomy and Trump and tariffs and everything, but actually people don't live in the macroeconomy. They live in the parish where the church roof has been fixed and now the church is open morning and after school for breakfast clubs and after school care, so somebody can go back to work and the household income has doubled. These are real things, and I think that kind of chat. I heard Rachel on Monday's episode saying, it's classic Kemi is going to become a new phrase, and I think that is a classic Kemi comment.
And she said that to Jordan Peterson as well.
Let's take it all very seriously.
Oh, yes,
then.
explaining the Lib Dem. Kemi Badenoch explaining the Lib Dems to Jordan Peterson.
Well, the fact that Jordan Peterson is interested in the Lib Dems means that Ed Davey should be really pleased.
But he clearly never heard of them. He was like, who are these guys? And they're the church roof fixers. Marie, what's Davey's strategy been at PMQs?
Well, I think it's essentially been, and I don't mean that in a bad way. I see that can be construed as a bad way, but I think it's kind of like liberal populism. So I saw someone describe it, which I really enjoyed, as essentially calling for obvious things no one else is calling for various reasons. Labour can't do it because they're the government and they love to tie themselves in knots and so on. So I think stuff like, so last month he called on Starmer to hit Trump with some tariffs. 2 months ago it was, we should build closer ties with Europeans, especially at the moment. So all the stuff that will make, I think, a lot of normal people go, oh yeah, why are we not doing that? That seems really obvious, and nearly targeting the people who don't follow perhaps politics, sort of really, really closely, and who don't realise that some things are actually quite complex, so I think he's become really good at making the very simple, obvious point of being hence my populism thing, which I think is kind of what he's doing, of hang on, why are we not getting closer to Europe? Why are we not sticking tariffs? They're sticking tariffs on us. So I think
can we think of another word? Because populism, I suppose, is associated with just lies and fantasies. Is it just popularism, like saying popular things?
I don't hate that. That's a really good, popularism, yeah.
Popular. So how important is the anti-Trump thing? Because I noticed a few things. He was calling on Starmer to make, I mean, sort of a bit gimmicky, but calling on Starmer to go and visit Mark Carney in Canada with solidarity. Scottish Lib Dem MP Christine Jardine wants to create a visa fast lane for refugees from Trump's America, basically. They've got a lot of anti-Trump stuff. And does that sort of give them sort of wings at the moment?
I think it does, but I think that even extends beyond Westminster politics. So I suspect that, a podcast like ours, a lot of listeners are very, very anti-Trump and very happy. We talk about that a lot. I write a column for the New European. My understanding is that, we are doing quite well as a paper out of people really hating Donald Trump. So I think anyone who's kind of on the liberal left at the moment, I think, is being buoyed slightly but by Trump being Trump, which obviously I would say is a pretty fucking thin silver lining.
Yeah.
But,
I'm actually going to disagree with Marie there, because I think although you're right in everything that you said, I disagree with how relevant it is actually for them politically. Davey, I think, sees it important personally to stand up for all these things that he thinks are morally right and to take also I think he wants to be seen as a kind of serious elder statesman. He's been in Parliament on and off.
Yeah, he really does act like it on that fucking
else.
Bungee jump.
Right. But he's he's a
Harold
former...
Macmillan doing that.
Take me seriously.
You might if you brought him back.
The thing is, though, if you look at the actual numbers, the recent polling, they're at, I think, something like 70, it depends which one you look at, but between 17 and 20%. Some polls, even say high as 22. But Starmer's also lifted in those polls recently, whereas the others, Reform, are dipping. And Starmer's lifted because of the Trump effect. He is seen as the kind of the strong prime minister on the global stage. The reason that Lib Dems are benefiting isn't to do with Davey having this kind of global view. It's to do with the fact that what's going on domestically and the rage at Labour not living up to their expectation.
Matt, Davey, of course, was mad for stunts during the general election campaign and made us all very happy. Do you expect to see him back on the paddle board, or will this sort of undermine the position he's taking at the moment?
Well, if you type Ed Davey into Google News, the very first stories that come up are Sir Ed Davey rides rubber ring to highlight pothole problem.
The most Lib Dem headline of all time.
Ed Davey launches election campaign on a hobby horse. And I genuinely got halfway through an article about him training to join the GB lacrosse team in time for the Olympics before I realised it was an April Fool. I got off, I was like, this feels very... Oh, it's an April Fool. Okay, good. I think he's straddling an interesting board. Like, he is trying to do both things at once. And I think it kind of works because the media is so atomized at the moment. So he can be on one day crazy Davey,
TikTok video,
going up a climbing frame or whatever, and then the next day he can be like, why does the Prime Minister not take on Trump? And it sort of doesn't matter at the moment because it feels like every day is a totally new slate, and no one's really paying attention to what's happening before. And I think because the Lib Dems don't get that much coverage, in a way, any coverage he gets is good.
Hannah, I was surprised when the Lib Dems made him leader because I thought they'd want someone untarnished by the Cameron Clegg years. He was up against Layla Moran, who I thought would be much better for rejuvenating the party or whatever. But obviously, they've done rather well. So have they escaped the shadow of the coalition that so much has now happened that people aren't holding that against them?
I think two things happened. One, so much has happened, passage of time. People have, forgotten the detail. Number two, some of the people who were really cross about that and lurched to Corbyn as a response, some of the student voters and so on who are very cross about tuition fees, that's all a long time ago for them now. They are now people in their mid-30s, which is a very different perspective to look at politics from, let's be honest. And the other thing also is just that there were, even at the time, even though they were punished at the ballot box initially, there was still a kind of dedicated hardcore Lib Dem votership that was just delighted to see them in office at all in coalition. So it was only a fraction of the vote that got them into coalition that was irritated in the first place. So a combination of all those three things means that we're just in a completely different position now.
Marie, Badenoch and Starmer seem obsessed on a daily basis with not losing voters to Reform. But I wonder if they're neglecting their socially liberal flanks. MSP Jamie Green has just defected to the Lib Dems from the Tories, who he calls Trump-esque and Reform light. And I know most of the more left wing Labour voters are more likely to go Greens than Lib Dem, but I wouldn't be surprised if some would go Lib Dem. Why does no one ever talk about, oh no, what if we lose voters to them?
I find it entirely baffling as well. So it was quite interesting last week, Victoria Atkins, who's shadow DEFRA, as we all know.
Of course, of course.
Yeah. No, but he was, once upon a time, at the time when somehow half the Parliamentary Conservative Party was a rising star and perhaps a future leader. To be fair, again, 70% of them got to be leader. But she's just kind of, she's one of those, and she's very much from close to the centre of the one centre of the Conservative Party. But she did an interview last week where she actually talked about going, actually, we should appeal to people who, we're losing to the Lib Dems. And it was like, oh my God, I cannot remember the last time a senior Conservative politician addressed just the very topic of the Liberal Democrats, aside from, again, Kemi saying something mental to Jordan Peterson, which I do not believe counts. So no, I'm not sure. And I do think that, again, Labour should be worried as well, because I think we talk a lot, and we've talked a lot on this podcast about the fact that Labour loves hippie bashing and may lose quite a lot of voters to the Greens. But I think it's not just that, and we saw that, I think when Blair was Prime Minister as well, you do have people who are squarely in the centre, on the centre-left, but who care a lot about, for example, personal liberties, or who will care a lot about, Brexit or immigration, whatever, that there will be issues, despite them being on the centre-left, that will mean that they are eventually going to become less likely to vote Labour, and that's when they go to the Lib Dems. So again, I think it's kind of where we're talking to, obviously, so I feel like the Labour Party, the Labour government, is really worried about the threat of reform. I think quite a lot of the commentariat, ourselves included, and rightly, is worried about, losing votes to the Greens, or to even, the kind of more minor or local parties, but no one's really doing but actually pissed off centrists are a thing as well.
But I think I've think probably expressed this opinion before, but I just think the political media just finds liberals. I don't just mean centre as an ultra-centrist, but liberals, centre-left, where they find these people incredibly boring and the values incredibly boring, and they find reform and their fellow travellers very, very spicy. So it's always like, what are reform up to? Why are young men leaning towards reform or whatever? And I mean, all these people kind of voting Lib Dem, saying, I'm really disappointed with Labour. Social liberalism is a good thing, as rejuvenated Roy Jenkins would agree. But that's just not very interesting.
It's not, and I think you see that. I was really struck when, going to party conferences where obviously Labour and Tories, you'd get, all the papers, whatever, would have their entire lobby teams. But then actually, Lib Dems was actually really fun as a journalist, because quite often none of the political editors would be there. So it'd be all the quite junior people. So it was very much, when the cats are away, the mice will play. So, you'll get really drunk with the other junior journalists. But, but at the same time, all the senior journalists would absolutely go to UKIP/Brexit Party /Reform. So it's a bit like, why is that the big dogs and the Lib Dems, gets at most the medium dogs? I always found that.
I feel like
really
that's
weird.
getting worse as well, because obviously we're in this space now where the attention economy is so fragmented. It's just a race for eyeballs in any format. That in the past you would have had a newspaper that would at least cover all three party conferences with, if not equal space, then equal seriousness, and that's just disappeared entirely now.
And there is just that fascination with the rising right.
Yeah.
Like a piece that just goes, he's 25, he's gay, he's a hipster, and he hates immigrants and Jews. As opposed to just here's somebody, they're 35, they're very sensible, they've done a lot of good work in the community, and they don't hate minorities. And it's like, well,
exactly, but I would also say the thing about Corbyn was that there was zeal on both sides, hatred and yet huge enthusiasm. And that, again, was, if it's not in the middle, it's exciting, it's odd, unusual. We're not usually here. So it becomes this kind of this is new narrative.
That's why the phrase radical centrism, I think, my theory is that it was invented to basically go, we're exciting too.
I think they should call it podcast populism. Because that's where we are with a lot of these people. It's that sort of people who listen to political podcasts, probably like this one, and others, who are feeling a bit miffed about stuff, but would never kind of go too far right.
Yeah. Okay. Podcast popularism.
Podcast popularism. Yeah.
Populism.
Podcasterism.
It's the new thing. So, Matt, just to wrap up, what would you say is the most compelling argument to vote Lib Dem right now? Oh, I don't ask anybody's voting preferences, but abstractly.
I think probably... at the moment, obviously, there are local issues, and if there are local issues in your area, that's what you focus on. But in a general sense, probably to put pressure on the other parties to stop looking at reform so much, to show that the Tories and Labour, in different ways, that they need to pay attention to these voters, because these, as we've all talked about, these voters are being not underrepresented in the media, because a lot of the media is them, but underrepresented by what gets talked about in the media. I think that's part of the problem, by the way. I think it's part of it is that journalists maybe feel like they're sort of like that, and so they don't feel like they want to talk to people who are like that. They want to talk to other people, different people, interesting people. But yeah, I think that there needs to be a sense in which, because otherwise all of the, the Overton window and all that kind of stuff, all the pressure is on that side. We need a bit of pressure coming the other way, going, no, if you keep moving to the right, you're going to lose these people.
So your answer is that journalists should start talking to their own mates more often.
I mean, I've said it. I've always said it. Yeah.
Stop hating.
Go back to Islington dinner parties. That's what it's all about.
I think, just stop being embarrassed by your own values.
But that's what the BBC obviously struggles with all the time.
Yeah.
Is that you're constantly going, well, we sort of think that maybe those people are perhaps a bit wrong, but we can't say that out loud, so we have to kind of pretend that they're absolutely great.